The opulent chandelier cast a golden glow over the grand entrance of the Crown Regency banquet hall. Guests in elegant evening gowns and tailored tuxedos glided across the polished marble floors, the soft hum of polite conversation filling the air. Natalie Hayes, the Gala's event coordinator, stood near the entryway, clipboard in hand, scanning the arriving guest with an eagle eye. This was her moment. The Gala, a prestigious event for industry leaders and influencers, was the crown jewel of her career. Natalie had spent months perfecting every detail, from the floral arrangements to the hors d'oeuvres. Nothing could go wrong, not on her watch. "Welcome, Mr. Whitman," she said with a polished smile, checking off another name on her list. As she greeted each guest, her focus remained sharp, ensuring every attendee adhered to the event's strict dress code. The crowd flowed smoothly until Natalie's gaze landed on a man stepping through the entrance. He was in his late 40s, dressed in a tailored black suit and polished shoes, but atop his head was a glaring red MAGA hat. Her stomach tightened. The bold hat clashed with the elegance of the event, and Natalie immediately saw it as a disruption. Guests glanced his way, some exchanging uneasy whispers. The man approached the check-in table, his expression calm and confident. "Good evening," he said warmly, extending an invitation card. "David Anderson?" Natalie glanced at the name, recognizing it from the guest list, but unable to place it. Her focus remained on the hat. "Mr. Anderson," she said with a tight smile, "I'm afraid your attire isn't entirely in line with the event's dress code." David raised an eyebrow, his tone polite but firm. "I'm wearing formal attire. The dress code doesn't mention hats." Natalie stiffened. "While that's technically true, this is a sophisticated event, and your choice of headwear may cause discomfort for other guests. I'm going to have to ask you to remove it." David smiled faintly. "I appreciate your concern, but I'll keep it on. It's just a hat." Natalie's polite veneer cracked. "I'm sorry, Mr. Anderson, but I can't allow you to enter unless you comply." David paused, his expression unreadable, then nodded. "If that's how you feel." As he turned to leave, Natalie exhaled, feeling vindicated. Yet the quiet confidence in his departure left her uneasy, a feeling she couldn't shake. Little did she know, this encounter would soon become the defining moment of the evening and her career. Natalie stepped forward, heels clicking against the marble floor as she intercepted the man before he could blend into the elegant crowd. Her practiced smile remained in place, though her eyes betrayed a flicker of irritation. "Mr. Anderson," she began, her tone polite but firm, "thank you for joining us this evening. However, I need to address something before you enter. Your attire, specifically your hat, doesn't align with the spirit of this event." David Anderson turned toward her fully, his expression calm. "I'm sorry, but I don't quite understand. My suit is tailored, my shoes are polished. What's the issue?" Natalie gestured subtly toward the bright red MAGA hat atop his head. "This gala is a sophisticated event, and we strive to maintain a neutral and inclusive atmosphere. Your hat could be seen as divisive. I must ask you to remove it before proceeding." David tilted his head slightly, his voice measured. "I see, but it's just a hat. It's not against the dress code, is it?" "No, but—" Natalie hesitated, her resolve hardening. "This isn't about technicalities, it's about the message you're sending. Some guests might feel uncomfortable." David smiled faintly, his tone unwavering. "I appreciate your concern, but I'm not here to make anyone uncomfortable. I'm here as an invited guest, just like everyone else." Natalie stiffened. "With all due respect, Mr. Anderson, this is my responsibility as the event coordinator. I'm asking you to either remove the hat or leave." The crowd near the entrance began to take notice, curious glances darting their way. Natalie could feel the weight of the onlookers' stares, her sense of authority slipping. David remained composed. "I've respected your process, checked in properly, and complied with the dress code. I'd prefer not to leave, but I'm not taking off my hat." Frustration bubbled in Natalie's chest. She turned to the security team stationed nearby. "Gentlemen, please escort Mr. Anderson out. He's not in compliance with the event's standards." David sighed, holding up his hands. "No need to make a scene," he said as the guards approached. "I'll leave quietly, though I'm certain you'll come to regret this decision." His calm words stung, but Natalie dismissed them, watching as he exited without protest. She turned back to her clipboard, trying to shake the unease creeping over her. The night was young, and she had a job to do. Whatever discomfort the man's departure had caused would surely fade, or so she thought. The gala was in full swing, with glasses clinking and the hum of refined conversation filling the banquet hall. Yet, whispers about the incident at the entrance began to ripple through the crowd like an undercurrent. "Did you see the guy in the red hat?" one guest murmured to another, glancing toward the entryway. "Apparently he was turned away." "I heard it was a MAGA hat," another replied, eyebrows raised. "Bold move for this crowd. Honestly, I think the event coordinator did the right thing." Not everyone agreed. "Sure, it's a political statement, but he had an invitation," a third guest interjected. "Doesn't seem fair to kick him out for that." Meanwhile, David Anderson had left the building with the same calm demeanor he had exhibited during the confrontation. A few guests near the door watched him go, their expressions shifting from curiosity to recognition. "Wait," one whispered, her voice tinged with disbelief. "Isn't that David Anderson, the real estate magnate?" "You're joking," her companion replied, glancing at his retreating figure. "If that's true, he's supposed to be tonight's keynote speaker." As the realization spread among the guests, it didn't take long for the story to reach social media. Posts detailing the incident began popping up. "MAGA hat wearer denied entry to exclusive gala. Freedom of expression or enforcing professionalism." A bold move by the event coordinator. Was it the right call? Wait until they realize he's David Anderson. Yikes. By the time Natalie was summoned to her supervisor's office, she was already hearing murmurs from staff about the potential fallout. She entered the room, clipboard clutched tightly, her confidence wavering. Her supervisor, Eleanor, sat behind a desk, her expression a mix of disbelief and barely contained frustration. "Natalie," Eleanor began, "we have a problem. The man you turned away, David Anderson, isn't just an attendee. He's the keynote speaker for tonight, and one of the most influential figures in the industry." Natalie's breath caught. "What? He didn't say—" Eleanor cut her off. "He didn't have to. His name was on the guest list, and he expected to be treated like every other guest. Instead, you've created a public relations nightmare." Panic began to set in. "I was just trying to maintain the event's standards," Natalie stammered. Eleanor's voice was sharp. "Well, your standards just jeopardized our event's success and possibly your career. Fix this, now." As Natalie left the office, her mind raced. She had to make things right. But how could she salvage a situation that had already spiraled so far out of control? Natalie stood in the corner of the supervisor's office, her hands clasped tightly as Eleanor finished her call with David Anderson. The tension in the room was palpable, the weight of the evening pressing down on her. When Eleanor finally hung up, she turned to Natalie, her expression stern. "He's agreed to come back, but only on one condition. You'll need to apologize to him publicly before he delivers his keynote address." Natalie's heart sank. The thought of standing in front of hundreds of influential guests and admitting her mistake was mortifying, but she knew there was no other option. "Understood," she said quietly, her voice trembling. An hour later, the murmur of anticipation spread through the gala as David Anderson returned, this time without the MAGA hat. He walked into the room with the same calm confidence as before, nodding politely to guests who greeted him. The sight of him sent a wave of relief through the crowd, and a surge of anxiety through Natalie. As the keynote address was announced, Eleanor stepped up to the podium, briefly introducing Natalie. Taking a deep breath, Natalie approached the microphone, her hands shaking. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice wavering, "before we proceed with tonight's keynote speech, I need to address something important. Earlier this evening, I made a mistake in how I handled Mr. Anderson's arrival. I let my own assumptions cloud my judgment, and in doing so, I failed to uphold the values of professionalism and inclusivity that this event represents. For that, I sincerely apologize." A smattering of applause broke out, and Natalie stepped aside, feeling the weight of her words settle. David Anderson took the stage, his demeanor composed and gracious. He began his speech with humor, instantly easing the tension in the room. As he transitioned into the heart of his message, his tone turned reflective. "Inclusivity and professionalism aren't just words," he said, "with their actions. They're about seeing beyond appearances and focusing on what unites us. Tonight, I had a small reminder of how quick judgments can create unnecessary barriers." Though he didn't explicitly mention his earlier encounter with Natalie, the audience understood the subtext. His words resonated, weaving a lesson about shared goals and mutual respect that transcended politics and personal beliefs. From the sidelines, Natalie watched, deeply humbled. His speech illuminated the very principles she had failed to uphold, leaving her with a profound sense of accountability. As the crowd erupted into applause at the conclusion of his speech, Natalie resolved to ensure that this mistake would define her growth, not her career. As the applause died down and guests began mingling again, Natalie stood at the edge of the room, her thoughts racing. She knew she couldn't let the night end without speaking directly to David Anderson. Summoning her courage, she approached him as he finished a conversation with another attendee. "Mr. Anderson," she said softly, her hands clasped nervously. He turned to her, his expression warm but curious. "Natalie," he replied, his tone inviting. "I wanted to thank you for coming back tonight," she began, her voice earnest, "and for handling everything with such grace. I was wrong to make assumptions about you, and I deeply regret how I treated you earlier. It was unprofessional and completely out of line." David smiled faintly, nodding. "Apology accepted," he said. "We all make mistakes, Natalie. What matters is what you take from them. This industry, and life in general, requires a balance of decisiveness and empathy. I hope this experience helps you find that balance." Relief washed over her as his words sank in. "It already has," she promised. In the weeks following the gala, the organizers implemented a new training initiative for event staff, spearheaded by Eleanor with input from David himself. The program emphasized impartiality, conflict resolution, and maintaining professionalism under pressure. Natalie was one of the first to volunteer, eager to show her commitment to growth. Through the training, Natalie learned how to navigate complex situations with empathy and discretion. She began to understand that professionalism wasn't just about enforcing rules, but about creating an environment where everyone felt respected. Slowly but surely, she earned back the trust of her colleagues and the confidence of her supervisors. Months later, Natalie was tasked with organizing another high-profile event, this time for an international conference. The stakes were just as high, but Natalie approached it with a renewed sense of purpose. On the night of the event, she stood at the entrance, greeting guests with warmth and professionalism. When David Anderson arrived, she extended her hand with a genuine smile. "Welcome, Mr. Anderson. It's wonderful to see you again," she said. David shook her hand, his eyes glinting with approval. "Good to see you too, Natalie. It looks like you've found your stride." As the evening unfolded smoothly, Natalie felt a quiet pride in how far she had come. The experience had taught her invaluable lessons about humility, empathy, and the importance of treating others with respect and understanding, no matter how they presented themselves. The night ended with success, but for Natalie it was more than just another event. It was a testament to the power of second chances and the growth that can come from even the most humbling experiences.